Hey everyone, I'm Mike Mahoney. I'm a professional wood turner, and I'd like to introduce to you my signature line of tools that are made by Carter and Son out of Seattle, Washington. And we're going to start with the wood beater. Well, we're going to rough turn the outside of this green bowl with the wood beater. And the wood beater is a 3/4 inch gouge, and it's really large and it absorbs vibration, so it takes a lot of stress out of my hands. So let's go for it. So when I'm trying to make a nice smooth curve here, I'd like to use my shear scraper tool. And what's beautiful about this is 5/8 inch, so it's pretty rugged, it won't vibrate a lot, and I'm really acute here on the cutting edge. And the steeper I can get that cutting edge, the smoother the surface will be. As I mentioned earlier about getting this tool very steep against the wood, what I really mean is a lot of people will put this tool in their belt, but what they really need to do is put it in their pocket. Get that almost probably 75 degrees to the wood, and it just peels the surface. And you don't want to put a lot of pressure on the wood. Just plane it, lightly touch the surface, and you'll come out with some very nice ribbons. Here's another tool I'd like to introduce to you. It's called the spear scraper. I got the idea for this tool from Richard Raffin and Ray Key in the day. They used to use a tool that was much wider than this, but they used it to plane the surface of the exterior of a bowl. It's also got a very sharp point on it that will make a really nice crisp groove in your work, and I'll show you how that works in a second. You can also think about it as a planing tool. You can come across here, and as long as the tool is at an angle, as the lathe runs, you can just kind of plane that surface and level it up nice. So I used the point of the tool to make 3 evenly spaced grooves, and then I picked up the tool and rounded each corner, and that gave me some recessed beads. You could also do some ones that are more proud with this tool as well, and I'll show you that. So if you're inclined to put some details on your work, I've got a raised band here, and with the spear point, I could put some nice beads with this raised band. So I've got the exterior in the shape that I like. Now I'm going to remove the interior. So that's a testament to the wood beater. I could reach 4 or 5 inches over the tool rest and rip out the inside of this bowl without any vibration. So I've got the bulk of the wood removed out of this bowl. What I have to do now is develop a nice looking rim, and then I'm going to undercut the interior. And the reason I do that is because it's going to make the bowl easier to pick up, and it gives it a nice little crisp detail. So in order to undercut the rim, I'm going to use the cleaner, which is a 1/2 inch bar, a much smaller tool than the wood beater, and the wood beater would be an inappropriate tool to make that cut because it's not detail oriented. It's too big. It's be cutting too much wood. The cleaner will definitely do a better job to make that undercut rim. So one more cut with the wood beater, I'm going to establish the rim's thickness. So I've got the cleaner now. I've got a little detail I want to put here on the rim, and that's just an OG curve, and I'll use the cleaner for that. So I finished up with a cleaner, so I'm basically 2/3 of the way done with the bowl, but I've got a bunch of bulk here at the bottom of the bowl. That is when I use the bottom feeder here. This is a 5/8 inch bar, and basically the design of the front of the tool here lays down that end grain fiber that it's gonna hit as I push through, and it makes it just smooth as a mirror. So I've made a jam chuck and I've jammed the bowl over that surface, and it's gonna hold it real tight. Now I'm gonna develop the base, and the base should be 1/3 of the total diameter of the work to make it stable. I'm gonna use the wood beater again to take a series of shear scrapes to get that finalized, and then we're gonna use the double-ended tool to do the rest. So the double barrel resolver tool is one of my favorites, and it's always right here next to my headstock on the lathe. It has a spindle gouge on one end and a bowl gouge on the other. And for this particular cut here, I did the detail with a spindle gouge, and I cut in like so, and then all the wood that has to be cut in this direction is all end grain fiber, and the design on the bowl gouge here, the bottom feeder style, cuts that into fine ribbon. You'll notice this tool doesn't have a handle on it, and because I think it doesn't need one, but some people will use a handle. The reason I don't use a handle is because I would think I would overuse it. So it's just for light, delicate, detailed cut. Well, there's the relatively finished bowl. I think I like it. The rim's nice undercut, good wall thickness. Let's go ahead and look at some of our thread chasing tools. So one of the things I'm most excited about with the whole lineup of the Carter and Son signature tools is the thread chaser, and I wanted for years to design my own thread chaser, and Dave and Paul were so good to actually make them for me. Thread chasing typically was always done in Europe, and actually threads have been around for probably a couple thousand years, believe it or not. Americans typically didn't use thread chasers, and I had to go to England to learn how to do it. My mentor, Bill Jones and Alan Batty, taught me how to thread chase. They do it in a different way than I do it, and there's for good reasons. The men in the trades that did thread chasing, they would stand at a lathe that could have been 50, 60 feet long, and their tool rests never pivoted like this. So they had to develop another tool it was a necklace basically that went around their neck, and when they needed to do hollowing work like I'm doing here, they would drop that tool rest over the tool rest and then take the thread chaser and do the female thread that way. While I was being taught that way to do it, I always thought to myself, well heck, why would I need that little necklace tool when I could pivot my tool rest like that? And of course, my mentor said, oh, you can't do it that way. Well, when I got home, that's exactly the way I did it. And then I didn't have to use the necklace. And that goes to another thing. When this is taught, at least taught in North America, I would not introduce that little necklace arm brace. I would do it just like this. So anyway, that's kind of an interesting thought. The male part of the chaser here has this little whale tail here, and that'll become apparent why that's important here in a second. For most thread chasing that you do, that's the male. That's the female. Now this is a 16 TPI, which I prefer to teach with. Now they also make a 12 TPI, which means 12 threads per inch. Reason you might want to use a coarser thread is if you wanted something to open a lot easier, because it would have less threads, but also in coarser timbers. Now the M42 tool steel that's on this is superior to any steels that I've ever cut threads with. Typically, the thread chasers that are made in Europe are made out of carbon steels. My mentors told me that only 9 or 10 woods in the world thread. Well, this tool steel makes almost all woods easy to thread. So I'm going to put a female thread right on the interior there. I used my double barrel tool, the spindle part, to put a little chamfered edge there. That's called a lead-in. You have to have that to make a thread. Now, I'm going to get the chaser right at center. I'm going to strike the wood right at the center mark there, and I'm going to make sure that the chaser is always horizontal, because if it's not, you're going to change the pitch. So keep that horizontal. Then we're going to turn the lathe on somewhere in this diameter. 500 RPMs is good, and then we're going to just get a rhythm going here before we touch the wood, and notice the angle I'm at, and then I'm going to strike basically somewhere in the middle of the chaser, not the front. And then basically just put a spiral in the wood and push that spiral through, and then eventually the chaser is going to go parallel with the bed of the lathe straight back through to make a good thread. Actions like this, like this, like this, like this, like this. At any point, the chaser can never stop, because if it does, you're just making a groove. So we've got the female thread made. Now I'm going to measure the hole, the diameter of the hole, with my calipers here, and then make slightly larger. Don't complicate this by using thousandths of an inch or anything like that. Just make this slightly larger. So now here's a piece of African blackwood. We're going to put that in the chuck. We're going to make a male thread, and we're going to make sure that fits on there good. Then we're going to make another female chuck, and then we'll do the finial. So I'm going to round up this piece of African blackwood to make our lid. I'm going to use my dimensioning tool. This is a 3/8 inch bar. I use it as a skew, a parting tool, a beading tool, all these things. Basically, all I need to do is just make this a cylinder, get my dimension right, get my diameter right, and this tool will do it all. Well, the African blackwood piece is prepped already. What I've got here is a diameter slightly larger than that hole, and then I put a little relief stop right here so the thread chaser won't hit the face of the wall here, otherwise it'll strip out the threads. What's unique again with this thread chaser, it has this relief here, and that's going to help us sneak up to that wall without hitting it. Now notice I have the tool rest back a little bit from the work. I want the well tail here to be free from the tool rest, so the tool rest will be behind the curvature here. Now I'm going to start at an angle like this, strike a thread, just a little spiral, and eventually bring the tool over so it's parallel to this surface here. And again, pulling away before I hit that wall. You can see why that well tail is important. We'll check to see if that fits. Perfect. So here's our finial piece. It's got the male thread on there. It fits perfectly in our vessel. Then I made a female dimension here, and that's going to thread in here. This will give me a good opportunity to make a quality finial. And in order to make this finial, I'm going to use the 3/8 inch finalizer spindle gouge and of course the dimensioner. What's unique about this wood is I could use this tool as a negative rake scraper, and this type of wood takes a negative rake better than it takes a cut. Well, that's the process and how I use the thread chasers. There's so many applications for thread chasers. One other thing to talk about the Carter and Son thread chasers that other chasers don't feature is typically when you bought a chaser from another company, they haven't made it so it's usable. Carter and Son has softened all the edges here, and so it makes it glide across the tool rest nice and smooth. They've also been very careful to give you a full tooth on the front of it, because sometimes the way they are manufactured in Europe, they're just chopped and you might get a half a tooth or whatever, and it's just no good. Anyway, and also these have a negative rake scraper here that's sharpened at a 12-degree angle, and they have to be negatively raked, otherwise they're really catchy. Well, other tools in my signature lineup are the 40/40 tools. Now, what does that actually mean? A lot of professionals advocate 40/40 tools, and I agree with that, but I also think there's some other varieties. Typically, the tools I use would have a 40-degree bevel, which is just like the other tools that we have in the lineup. But the cutting edge here is much more acute, it's sharper. And to me, that makes the tool a little bit more versatile. I could actually use these as shear scrapers a lot, which many people who advocate 40/40s don't advocate shear scraping. Now, if you want a 40/40, what you're going to get is a tool that's not as aggressive, and that could be important too, because if you're not into removing wood at a fast pace or anything, and you want to just nick off a little wood just for a little bit of design, the 40/40 is probably for you. So let's talk quickly about that. So this particular tool is a 5/8 inch 40/40 tool. I also come in 1/2 inch and 3/4. So I've got a 40-degree bevel here and a 40-degree cutting edge. Why is that important? Well, the 40-degree angle, basically we're measuring everything from the flute. So if this is 0, we're gonna go half of that would be 45. 5 degrees more acute would be 40. That's how we're gonna measure that. Now, depending on the type of timber you use, let's say you work with really dense timbers, you're going to want to adjust that bevel more obtuse, because then it doesn't become as aggressive. But if you're working with softer timbers, soft hardwoods, conifers, you can actually start making that bevel more acute, maybe a 30/40 or something like that. That's the concept behind all of that. But I think for just all around good tools, 40/40 is a great place to start. Thanks everybody for watching my signature line of tools. I hope you appreciate them like I do. They're all available at carterandsontoolworks.com. Hope to see you on the turning trail.